On behalf of Fair Districts PA and our county lead, Susan Wood, we wish to thank Commissioner Ames, Commissioner Litz, Commissioner Phillips, Mr. Woolmuth for inviting us to present this brief workshop this afternoon. My name is Duncan McLean. I am a resident of South Lebanon Township and a volunteer with Fair Districts. I am here with Jean Handley of Dauphin County. She is an issue expert with Fair Districts and has kindly agreed to come today. Unfortunately, Ms. Wood, our county lead, is currently in Utah visiting grandchildren and thus unable to join us this afternoon. We point out that we also have 700 other Lebanon County citizens who participate in Fair Districts Action Network, some of whom have joined us. As you may know, Fair Districts is a nonprofit, nonpartisan Pennsylvania citizens advocacy organization opposed to gerrymandering and favoring an alternative fair redistricting process. We have the endorsement of 34 other advocacy groups. Fair Districts is seeking a resolution from the Lebanon County Board of Commissioners in support of the general principles behind our legislative objective in the General Assembly. Those principles are nonpartisanship, impartiality, and fairness. Specifically, we join many legal, political, and juridical experts, plus 8 other states, in recommending a nonpartisan Citizens Redistricting Commission. Fair District sees a small window of opportunity to enact the necessary changes by the 2021 redistricting that will occur after the 2020 census. This would require passage of the Redistricting Commission bills in the current legislative session. This timeline is reflected in the Let's End Gerrymandering flyer in your packet that looks like this on the left side. If Pennsylvania does not act now, the current issue of Time magazine predicts that gerrymandering will be a free-for-all driven by money, sophisticated software, and big data, the likes of which could not have been imagined by Alexander Hamilton in the Federalist Papers in 1788, I guess.
May I interrupt you, Doctor?
Sure.
Would you three like to come up along here to hear better or be part of it more? Or do you
I might. Thank you.
saw you straining there a little bit. So.
Either side, you're welcome to move forward.
Could be one of these,
More comfortable chairs.
Either side. Either side.
right? Splitting up.
So instead of a gerrymandering free-for-all, Fair Districts, for example, recommends an 11-person commission assembled under the supervision of the General Assembly from Pennsylvania citizens. The General Assembly would establish qualifications. The law would establish disqualifications, office holders, candidates for office, lobbyists, or their spouses. Commission members would be chosen by a random process from 3 pools, namely 4 from among registrants with the, quote, majority party, 4 from among members of the minority party, and 3 members registered as independent. The commission would be given the task of drawing district lines after each 10-year census for both Congress as well as our state senators and representatives. The law and constitutional amendment would require open meetings with public and press involvement in 4 or 8 different regions of the Commonwealth. This would be a departure from the current law that has district lines drawn by party leaders out of public view in Harrisburg. I will now review the 4 whereas statements of the Fair Districts PA model resolution and then invite further dialogue. Again, we hope that this will lead to your adoption of the resolution in favor of a fair redistricting commission. The first whereas states that Pennsylvania citizens deserve a fair, fully transparent, impartial, depoliticized process for drawing district lines. I would assert that this principle is axiomatic in a representative democracy. I would also remind us that the Founding Fathers eschewed political parties, understanding that their narrow interests could undermine the common good. However, I would also remind us that political parties and gerrymandering, named after Elbridge Gerry, one of the signers of the Constitution, framers of the Constitution, have also existed since the earliest days of the Republic. The second whereas states that gerrymandering works to the detriment of our representative democracy. This is a fact and a conclusion shared, of course, by Fair Districts PA and our 65,000 Pennsylvania petition signers, including over 700 from Lebanon County, as mentioned. It is also a fact and conclusion referenced by Chief Justice John Roberts in his majority opinion issued June 27. By the way, that decision was that excessive partisan gerrymandering is a non-judiciable claim beyond the reach of the Supreme Court, and thus remanded the issue back to individual states, and it underscores, of course, the necessity for Pennsylvania to act. The third whereas states the principles underlying the remedy advocated by Fair Districts PA, devoid of political motivation, fair, transparent, accurate legislative and congressional redistricting process, respects political subdivisions, prohibits districts from being drawn to favor or discriminate against a political party or candidate, requires the use of impartial and sound methodology when setting district boundaries, requires public input, fully complies with the constitutional requirement that no county, city, incorporated town, borough, township, or ward be divided unless absolutely necessary. The fourth whereas states the conclusion of legal experts that an amendment to the state constitution is necessary to permanently establish the independent commission, and this seems only logical to protect redistricting from the shifting political winds every 2, 4, or 10 years. Thank you again for your interest in redistricting issue. We are happy to entertain questions and discussion, and we hope to gain the support of the Board of Commissioners for the general concept of an impartial, nonpartisan citizen redistricting commission, not necessarily for any of the specific formats of such a commission. Our final comment is that the legislative delegation from Lebanon County will play a key role. Senator Fulmer chairs the Senate's State Government Committee, and Representatives Diamond and Ryan both sit on the corresponding House Committee. Part of Fair District's motivation in approaching you is to demonstrate that the issue matters to their constituents. And we Lebanon Countyans support their difficult work in crafting a remedy that goes to the heart of representative democracy, which was born in Philadelphia in 1776. So we now defer back to you to continue the discussion. Thank you very much.
I have 2 questions. The first question is, who makes these appointments? And I'll explain my question a little bit. If the people who are now making the decisions do the appointing, will their appointees represent them rather than do what you say?
That's a really good question. And by the way, before I give you an answer, I too would like to thank you for the opportunity to talk with you today. It's interesting that this happens on a day that our remembrance of our democratic principles and those that have sacrificed for it is really kind of in the forefront. So this is kind of a neat day to do this. To answer your question, Commissioner, Fair Districts advocates our particular what we would like to see. That doesn't mean that that's the way that it has to happen. From the approach of who appoints it under what we support, there would be a process which is pretty rigorous with the qualifications, and those people would be put into 3 separate pools: majority party, minority party, and non-affiliated party. And those pools, by random selection, would be narrowed down by, in the case that we are looking at, the Secretary of State, because they are Secretary of the Commonwealth, because they have, they're involved with the elections process, and they've taken an oath to make free and fair and that kind of thing. It gets whittled down to pools of 40 each. And then the party leaders have the opportunity to strike some candidates from those pools, 2 for each party leader in the majority party and the Democratic Party. So the pools get narrowed down to 96 people.
So the leaders and I say this respectfully, are not appointing, they are eliminating those that they don't want on.
Basically, yes.
Interesting.
Up to 2.
Up to 2 per pool.
Right.
So they each basically get 6 that they could strike, like a jury pool.
And can they strike across the board or just from their party?
They can strike out of I believe, out of any of the pools. That's a good
Interesting.
question. So that's the model that we are looking at in the bills, specifically HB 23. There are other models out there, which people are looking at. The Governor's Commission has another way of looking at it that just
Right.
came out. Does that answer your question?
It does. I mean, it's better than I thought. but I'm just like, are we really solving anything if the same people are appointed? But I understand there's a difference there, so that's interesting.
Let me just finish that, because I guess I didn't finish the total end of that. The other part of that would be, once they get whittled down to the 96 people, the 3 pools, then it would be random selection of some sort, which has to be defined by the General Assembly as to what rules go into that. And so the 11 would be picked that way, and you would have then 4 largest party, majority party, 4 minority party, and 3 of the non-affiliated with that.
But theoretically, they're getting rid of extreme people when they're eliminating, for whatever it's worth. So the next question is twofold. What is the length of the appointment, and are they eligible for successive terms on this appointment?
As far as the eligibility for the successive terms, once again, and I'm only speaking from what we're supporting at this point, no, I do not believe that they are, and also they are not allowed to, after they leave the commission, for 3 years, participate in a number of different things. For example, election, they can't be an elected official, they can't be a number of different things. So there's protections after they leave the commission for that. As far as the other part of your question, which
2
was
years, 4 years, 10 years?
yeah, that is, it has not been, because I think it's being left up a little bit to the General Assembly when they do their enabling legislation. But I believe that it would be, and maybe I can find it in here, it would be disbanded, I think they might have until the next term.
The 10 years?
Yeah, I think, but I will research that and get you an answer definitively.
And then
Before
how would any resignations, deaths, how would that be filled?
That would be filled by the same process, but out of those pools
The existing
that had
pool.
existed, and then they would be picked out of those pools.
Okay. I just wanted to understand it, so thank you for the
Yeah.
explanation.
Does that help?
It does.
One
Thank you.
concept I heard on what the term would be, again, this is all somewhat malleable, is that once all litigation had been completed, the term of the commissioners would end.
And that's very possible too. I'm trying to see if I can find this in here at all.
I don't know that Fair Districts has taken an absolute
Yeah,
position on
that's
that,
one of the,
thing.
that's where it goes back to, I'm not sure. I think that has to do with the enabling legislation, but I can definitely get back to you with an answer on that.
All right, thank you.
I have a question about your organization. You proclaim it to be nonpartisan. What definitive information could you give one to significantly indicate that it's nonpartisan?
Well, there's definitive information. First of all, and this is just anecdotal, as the first part, I don't think anybody really knows if they're Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, or, I mean, nobody ever talks about that. So, I mean, it's never discussed. We have also not taken any partisan positions, one way or the other, on any of this. We're just looking at impartial, fair. As far as donations and that kind of thing, all of our donations come from volunteers or the public. We have not, up to this point anyway, taken any huge donations and none from any partisan organizations at all. We have actually refused money from partisan organizations that want to
But
try
you
to
have
influence
taken
us.
some significant contributions,
Significant in
amount.
most of them are small donations of, I think we had one donation of around $10,000 at one point from an organization in Pittsburgh. Not an organization, it was a donor, I guess, in Pittsburgh. And also we had Ben and Jerry's that gave us a donation. And I'm not sure of the
Significant
amount.
contribution,
I think it was.
Like $400,000.
No, that was not Ben and Jerry's. We have had,
You
and I
have
said
had
recently,
$400,000
recently,
contribution.
there was from an anonymous,
Anonymous. Yeah. That's scary in itself.
well, it's anonymous, and they have given it to and I do not know who it came from, so I can't tell you, obviously, since it's anonymous. That just recently came in, and that is, I guess, it's hopefully to get our message out a little bit further. But
Well,
it is not, as far as I
Try to
know.
justify that. I've tried to
Sure.
justify that in my mind,
Mhm.
keeping in mind that this is all, quote, nonpartisan. Who would have, want to make a significant investment of $400,000, not knowing where this organization sits politically?
Someone
I
or
have trouble
some
justifying
people
that.
yes, someone or some people that really want to see a more fair, impartial process.
That
And that is
definitely-
people on both sides of it.
That definitely is a commitment, $400,000.
Yeah, it is. And like I said, unfortunately, I can't give you that because I don't have the information. And all I can say to that is that there is significant concern about this issue on all parts of the political spectrum. And so it could have come from anyone.
I made reference to the Time Magazine article, I don't know if anybody saw it. That pales to the $50 million that's being budgeted by the Democrats and $40 million by the Republicans. That's at least public knowledge in this next redistricting cycle. But
The same, it doesn't matter who,
Yeah.
if you have an appointed panel, that money is still going to influence and affect how this thing
Yeah.
goes. So I don't think we really would accomplish anything by just extending the government arm and have, appointed people. It's an exercise in futility as far as I see it. So that's just my opinion.
May I ask how far along you are? I understand this is only 2021 after the census that you would actually be trying to impanel this group, or if you get enough support. Any other counties so far endorsing or giving you any resolutions that you would know of
Yes.
that we can refer to?
In your packet on the left, the other one that I didn't mention was about Fair Districts PA, and on the other side, you can see the counties and municipalities. That was as of April that have,
Okay.
gone on record.
There are 20 counties that have endorsed it, and at least 7 who have, and probably more that have Republican majorities. There are over 330 municipalities that have also, the number has gone up since that has come in. I have, if you are interested in it, I have the resolution that was passed by Northumberland County, York County, and then CapCog, the Capital Area County Commissioners.
No, I'm good with just knowing that those two, if I want to reach out, to get another point of view. You mentioned Frank Ryan and Russ and
Perry County is also, I'm sorry, Perry County, if you want to reach out, I don't have their copy of theirs, but Perry, Cumberland, York, through the surrounding counties, Perry, Cumberland, York, Northumberland.
Center.
Northumberland
Yeah, have all passed.
and CCAP.
And CapCog, Capital Region of Council of Governments. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch it.
Capital Region Council of Governments. It's a
Council.
coalition, yeah.
COG, okay.
CapCog, and it's, I think 40 members of it are in that also, in the Capital Region.
Can I come back to Commissioner Ames' question about the $400,000? I think that information came from me, directly from Carol Kuhnholm, who is our executive, what do we call her, executive director?
She's the executive director.
And I told Bill Doherty about this, and he and I discussed this, and this was shared with me in response to Bill's concern, expressing exactly what you said. In other words, what are some of the possible, hidden agendas or hidden influences that we may not even know about, but that could be significant. So myself, I'm now speaking just as myself, I think it's a question that does need to be answered or responded to in some way. What I can tell you, as somebody who is fairly Johnny-come-lately to fair districts, my perception is that it really is nonpartisan, and they just emphasize that continually, and in fact say absolutely avoid anything that could smack of partisanship. And they are really reaching out. For instance, they are going to be having the commissioners from California will be meeting with the business community in Harrisburg next week. We actually have a Libertarian Party person who's on a panel in November. In other words, I think what I'm trying to convey to you is that Fair Districts is not only nonpartisan, it wants to be perceived as nonpartisan, and it is working as hard as it possibly can to erase any possible, perception that it could be in the thrall of anybody with any other hidden agenda. Because obviously, if that weren't the case, it would sabotage the whole effort, wouldn't it? So to me, it's an equal opportunity issue. As we know, the Democrats ruthlessly gerrymandered in Maryland, and the Republicans in other places, and according to this, everybody's in on it now. They've all got the same computers, they've all got the same money, they've all got the same big data, and it's just going to be a free-for-all.
Well, I started to ask about our three representatives and Senator Plummer, total three. But Bill's point to me is the stakes are high in all of this. So usually you follow the money when people have vested interests in outcomes. And so I feel a little bit uneasy challenging someone with the name FAIR on their lapel, because that's tells me what at least what you're trying to convey.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't be second guessing your, but I have to, because I'm going to want to reach out to find out what did they see that they were willing to vote and support a resolution in other counties. And also I'd like to find out have you a response from Fulmer and Frank Ryan and
Senator Fulmer is a prime sponsor of a bill that is in the Senate called SB 22. And SB 22 passed the Senate last year. It did not pass the House because of various things. But he has brought that bill up again with some tweaks. And so he is the prime sponsor of that. And so he is a proponent of reform for the redistricting process. We aren't supporting that bill at this time for a couple of reasons, but it's not necessarily that it's a bad bill or a partisan issue. One of the other things that I think people don't understand, and I'm going to be honest here, people look and say, oh, well, you're affiliated with the Democrats, or George Soros, whatever. That, to me, is not true. And one of the things that I think that many when we talk to Republicans, one of the things that should be known on this whole process is that they had the majority, and this time around, because of the nature of the state Supreme Court, the way that the state legislative districts are drawn is by a 5-member commission, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and a 5th person that they pick. But they can never decide, and so the state Supreme Court picks that 5th person. And so with the Democratic-leaning Supreme Court, and it should not be this way, but they're very likely to find someone for that fifth person that will lean more toward the Democratic side, thus saying to the Republicans, you don't really want that to necessarily happen to you. The other thing is, as far as any challenges to any of these maps, go before the state Supreme Court. And so, if there are challenges, the tendency will probably be to lean a little bit more toward the Democratic. And once again, we say, you don't want this to happen, necessarily, because it's just cyclical. It goes back and forth. Democrats do it, Republicans do it. Democrats did it back in the early 2000s and back in the 1990s. Republicans do it, and you can look at the various states. So when we talk about being nonpartisan, I mean, I think that's another thing to say, we're talking to Democrats, we're talking to Republicans, Libertarians, Green Party, every party, because it's just the system is not reflecting what the constituents really want. And so, I mean, that's one of the things.
I think I'd like to take your question right up to Carol.
Yeah.
I actually would like to know that myself. In other words, I have the same question. I have fair here, and it's a fair question.
It is.
So could we get back to you and see what she says? I don't know what she'll say. But why would somebody want to remain anonymous?
But
Well,
if
my-
you would like that,
you
we'll
know.
get it, yes.
My question would be along those lines. Sometimes people give money and you realize there is an agenda. Has there been any discussion about, I don't know how recent this has been, but has there been any discussion of either not accepting it or returning it to keep the fair and nonpartisan?
There has been refusal of partisan money coming from national organizations. I don't necessarily want to get into that too much, but that has been, they were approached with, we will give you this if you do this, and it was, no way, go away, from one of the parties. So we want nothing to do with it.
But has this specific donation that came in anonymously been discussed for possible either refusal or return?
Yeah, I believe it has, but I think that what Duncan has said is that we should be able to give you, or we hopefully will be able to get you a better answer on that from state leadership. Because honestly, I do not know who it is, and I was in a meeting where it's anonymous, so. But we'll get that information if you want it. What specifically would you like to know so that we can ask a good question to get your answer? Who is the money from?
I think that's a fair question. Our
Sure.
elections are based on that information.
It's a fair
I
question.
can walk over to the elections office and find out who contributed to any candidate's campaign and how much they gave.
Sure.
And we're talking about an issue here that directly deals with elections. So if someone's making that kind of a contribution, they must have an agenda. They're not just out of the goodness of their heart saying, well, this is a group of fair-minded people and I'm going to support them by giving them $400,000.
Yes, I totally agree with you, and we will try that. So that would be a question. Is there any other questions along those lines that you would like us to get answered?
And have they discussed whether or not it should be returned?
Okay.
And the rationale for,
And would you want to know, is there a quid pro quo or a stipulation or something?
absolutely.
Something like that. Fair Districts makes a big point if it's supposed to be transparent.
So we will
And
get
this is
as soon as we can.
I think
a
this
key
needs to be cleared
transparency
up in
issue.
order to move forward in some
Yeah.
people's minds, and I'd like to
Yeah.
see perhaps a unanimous support of this, but it doesn't sound like it would go forward unanimously unless we get that cleared up.
Fair point.
Okay, so
We will
thank you.
get that back to you as soon as we can.
Thank you.
I know that we're over
Your
our
head was
time.
shaking. I didn't know if you had a comment.
Yeah, I do. spend a lot of time talking about partisanship and money. Okay, first of all, a comparison was made between our current electoral process and this organization's process as far as obtaining funds and funding. Regular electoral process, we have something called PAC funds. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Can anyone determine where that money's coming from?
You can.
Yeah, but I mean, one of you said something about, well, I can just go to so-and-so and boom. Is it that easy with PACs?
That was me. I said I can
Yes,
go,
sir.
I can at least find out what pack it was.
Okay, but if you've never heard of the PAC and no one else has, and as far as I know, there's no law preventing that, you know, just having this PAC out of nowhere, as long as they've done all the legal parameters of filling out their PAC forms, etc., would you say it's quite possible that in the end, no one's going to know what the purpose or motivation was for that money?
And Fair Districts is challenging.
It's probably possible.
Okay, now, we do have in this organization, because we're not partisan, because we're not part of the political process, these guys can probably get an answer to that, or the organization can certainly make a determination going forward, if not already, how these funds are handled, accepted, rejected. The more important question I have is, partisanship or not, in the end, isn't the bottom line the details of the legislation? So no matter which party or people, whatever, came up with that legislation is visible, it's on the table, is that true? So if you don't like it, whatever party, whatever, if you don't like it, you don't have to vote for it, is that true? I'm asking you a question.
I mean, I guess I understand your question. I would say yes would be the answer.
Okay.
If you're looking for
Okay, so
dialogue.
So, to restate that, at that point, what difference does it make who paid for what or what party did what? It's on the table, the elected representatives can vote, and if that's not good enough, you can take it to the lawyers, you can take it to the courts. Now, you already heard some, you know, the organization's comments on, in this state, where that could wind up going. And
Well, it already has. I
Yeah.
mean, it ended up in the
That- well,
courts this time.
there you
And the
go.
courts made the decision.
Right, so.
But my concern is that I don't think a convoluted process like this is going to be any better in the end. And probably just muddies the waters and people trying to figure out how to beat the system. I just don't see it as a solution.
So your vision is that the current system is clearer and more fair than what's on these two bills?
To me, it is.
That there's no difference, in fact, it's going in it's making it less open to the public with what's going on with the process is. That's what you're saying, or not?
I'm not sure I understand your question, but,
Okay.
you know, I don't think we'll
Okay,
get
but-
anywhere debating it.
You're
back
right,
and forth.
and I'll just leave it at that, thank you.
I want to say just one thing too, is that I don't know all the details of the legislation or financing like these people do, but mostly what we've been doing is standing at the polls and collecting signatures on the petitions. And we get an overwhelming response, and that's from both Democrats and Republicans. You know, I live in a very Republican district, and I'd say 80% of the people we approached signed this petition because they saw that, you know, they don't like the legislators just picking their own, you know, their own committee and making the decision how the lines should draw. They want a fairer and more open process. And like I said, that 80% of the people we approached, I'd say, would sign the petition.
There is overwhelming support for it as far as those petitions anyway. And we've got probably about 70,000 signatures at this point on those petitions. And we don't know whether they're Republican, Democrat, no party, but whatever it is, but there is, support for it, so.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioners, for the opportunity to speak with you. If you have any other questions, feel free to contact us if you think about this. But in the meantime, we will try to get back to you as soon as possible with some kind of answer on the financial.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there contact information in here? Did I see that?
Yes, it's
Okay.
on the statement,
Thank you.
the presentation.
All right,
Thank you.
very good. Thank you.